For thousands of years, one of the strangest and most mysterious passages in ancient scripture has remained hidden in plain sight. In the opening chapters of Genesis, before the story of Noah and the Great Flood, there is a brief mention of a group of beings called the Nephilim. The passage is only a few verses long, yet it has inspired countless questions, theories, and debates. Who were the Nephilim? Were they truly giants? Were they ancient warriors and rulers? Were they something more, a mysterious mixture between the spiritual and human worlds? And why does Genesis mention them immediately before describing the destruction of the world through the flood? To understand the mystery of the Nephilim, we first have to look beyond the modern imagination. When most people hear the word giant, they picture enormous human beings from fairy tales, towering creatures with impossible strength. But the ancient world understood the idea of giants differently. The Hebrew word Nephilim is unusual because it appears very rarely in the Old Testament. Because of that, scholars have debated its exact meaning for centuries. Some have connected it to the Hebrew word meaning to fall, leading to the famous interpretation of fallen ones. However, many scholars believe the word is connected to an ancient term meaning something closer to giants, powerful figures, or mighty warriors. In ancient cultures, physical size was often used as a symbol of power. A giant was not always just someone who was unusually tall. It could describe someone who was intimidating, violent, dominant, or almost larger than life. The same idea exists even in modern language. When people describe a political leader as a strong man, they are not talking about physical muscles. They are describing someone who has power, influence, and control. In the same way, ancient writers used the idea of giants to represent people who had become powerful beyond normal limits, rulers who dominated others and inspired fear. The mystery becomes even deeper when we look at the world surrounding the flood story. The flood narrative in Genesis was not written in isolation. Across the ancient Near East, civilizations preserved stories about a great flood that destroyed an earlier world. From Mesopotamia to Greece, ancient peoples carried memories of a catastrophic event that separated an older age from the world that came afterward. Many cultures described the world before the flood as a remarkable era, a time when humanity possessed knowledge, wisdom, and abilities that later generations no longer had. To ancient civilizations, the past was often viewed as a lost golden age. They believed the earliest generations had access to secrets that disappeared after the Great Disaster. But Genesis presents a very different interpretation. Instead of describing the pre-flood world as a perfect golden age, Genesis portrays it as a civilization that had become deeply corrupted. The problem was not simply that humanity had advanced. The problem was that humanity had gained power without the wisdom and morality needed to use that power correctly. According to Genesis, the world before the flood had reached a point where violence and corruption had spread everywhere. The Nephilim appear in this exact moment of history. The text describes them as heroes of old and men of renown. At first glance, that sounds like admiration. These were famous figures remembered by later generations. They were the names people celebrated. They were the rulers and warriors whose stories survived through history. But Genesis turns that idea upside down. The people others remembered as legendary heroes are presented as part of the reason the world had fallen into chaos. They were not symbols of humanity's greatest achievement. They represented humanity's greatest failure. This idea appears throughout ancient history. Civilizations often remember powerful kings and conquerors as heroes because they built empires, created monuments, and expanded influence. But power alone does not determine whether someone is good. A ruler can create great cities while also bringing suffering and destruction. The ancient world understood this tension very well. The same leaders who brought wealth and technology could also create systems built on violence, oppression, and fear. This is why the Nephilim became such an important symbol. They represented a civilization that had become powerful but had lost its connection to what was right. The flood, in this interpretation, was not simply a natural disaster. It was a reset. A moment when an entire corrupted world was judged and a new beginning was created through Noah and his family. But this raises another fascinating question. Did the flood describe a real historical event? Many ancient cultures remembered a massive flood, and there is archaeological evidence showing that dramatic environmental changes occurred thousands of years ago. At the end of the last ice age, melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically. Large areas that once supported human settlements were eventually covered by water. One example often discussed is the Black Sea region, where researchers have found evidence of ancient settlements now submerged beneath the waters. For people living through such a transformation, it would have seemed like the entire world had changed. A civilization could disappear. Coastlines could move. Entire communities could be lost forever. A disaster of that scale would naturally become preserved in human memory through stories passed from generation to generation. But the Genesis account focuses on something deeper than the disaster itself. It asks a question that has followed humanity throughout history. What happens when knowledge and power increase faster than wisdom and morality? The ancient world believed knowledge itself was not necessarily evil. Technology, discovery, and advancement could be used for good. But knowledge without responsibility could become dangerous. This theme appears repeatedly in ancient stories. Humanity reaches for something greater. Humanity gains power. But without the right character and wisdom, that power leads to destruction. The story of the Nephilim is ultimately not just a story about mysterious giants. It is a story about ambition, power, corruption, and the consequences of humanity trying to control forces it does not fully understand. The Nephilim stand at the crossroads between mythology, history, theology, and archaeology. They represent a forgotten age, a world before the flood, a world of legendary figures, lost knowledge, and unanswered questions. And the deeper we look into ancient texts, the more we discover that the story of the Nephilim was never just about who they were. It was about what they represented. A warning about what happens when power grows greater than wisdom. A warning about what happens when humanity reaches for knowledge without understanding the responsibility that comes with it. And perhaps most importantly, a warning about a civilization that had everything, except the ability to control itself. But if the world before the flood truly contained lost knowledge and forgotten wisdom, what exactly did ancient civilizations believe they inherited from that mysterious age? That question leads us into the next chapter. The lost civilization before the flood, the secrets of ancient knowledge, and the forgotten world that came before humanity's greatest catastrophe.